So I was in an algebraic topology class in grad school at the University of Illinois, and the professor, who was from Poland, got to the name Hrabowski and said Hrabowski, and I raised my hand, and he said, no, no, no. And I said, this is America. Yes, yes, yes. So I am Hrabowski. This is no mistake. And I am president of the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. Today's New York Times has a wonderful op-ed piece entitled, How I Fell in Love with Math. And I saw it and I got goosebumps because I have always loved math. It turns out that that piece was written by one of my UMBC professors in math, who is a little younger than I am, but we both grew up in big cities. He grew up in Mumbai, I grew up in Birmingham, and somehow we ended up liking math. Every person in here is a product of his or her childhood experiences. And so I often talk about my experiences in Birmingham as I explain why I do what I do. I remember sitting in the back of a church when I was 12. I didn't want to be there in the middle of the week. My parents insisted that I listen to this man talk. And to placate me, my parents allowed me to have my math book. If I could do math, I'd be happy. And I was a fat little kid. I knew what it meant to be a fat little kid and a fat little math nerd, loving math. And so I had M&Ms in one hand and math in the other. I'm eating my M&Ms with the nuts, and I'm doing my math. And all of a sudden, I hear this man say, if the children become involved in this peaceful protest, all of America will understand that children want a good education. And I looked up, and he said, and it may end up being that our children can go to the better schools, meaning to the white schools. Well, I always hated the fact that we knew we were in schools that were not as good, that did not have the resources. I hated the idea of having to use textbooks that had been discarded by white children from their schools. And I always wondered why the world was like that. And so I said, who is that guy? And of course, it was Dr. King. I was so excited that I went home and said to my parents, I want to go. I want to participate. And they said, absolutely not. And I said, you must be hypocrites. Now, at that time, you did not say those kinds of things to your parents. So they told me to go to my room, and they thought over it all night and came back and finally allowed me to go. And I did spend a terrible week in jail because of this peaceful protest. Well, the message was this. Toward the end of the week, Dr. King came to the outside of the jail with our parents, and he said this to the children: what you do this day will have an impact on children who have not been born. And there were a lot of tears, and kids wanted to get out of jail. I did not fully understand the significance of the statement, but I knew it was profound. Now, fast forward. That was all in 1963. I was determined to major in math in college. I did. I went through school always loving math, but I always noticed that most kids did not like math. And I was always trying to figure out what could we do to help more children like math. I went to grad school, never saw anybody, rarely ever saw any grad student who looked like me. Of course, saw no professors who were black. And I was always thinking, what could we do to have more people from different backgrounds making it in math and science? In fact, there was only one woman on the faculty at that time out of about 100 faculty members. So there were no women, and there was just literally, I was there, and every now and then I'd see someone. And so I decided, literally, beginning in the late 60s, in 1970, that I wanted to focus my attention, my life, on increasing the number of people of color and therefore people in general who would succeed in math and science. Let me ask a question. How many of you in this room love to read? Let me see your hands if you love to read. It's a typical American value. Now, how many of you love mathematics? This is a pretty nerdy group. I'm very impressed, very impressed. By the way, I'm called the mega nerd on my campus. Mine is a campus of nerds. We got a lot, half of the students are in math and science and others in the arts and humanities, but we talk a lot about what it takes to make it in math and science. My dream has been to create a cadre of brilliant young people of all races who are not only excited about science and technology, but who can go to the best universities in the world and become leaders in science and tech, from Stanford to Harvard to MIT, and to make sure that we had women and people of color in those groups. And the challenge I faced was that many people said to me, it's not time for people of color to do that well, that it will take more generations for that to occur. And so the daring part of my message has to do with, first of all, this notion all the way back to when I was a child, when somebody could dare to say the world does not have to be the way the world was. It does not have to be the case that people of each race will have to be separate and that we will have people of color at the bottom, that the world can be much better than that, that America is better than that. And so for the first time as a child in that experience in the civil rights movement, I began to understand just how great America is, that it was possible for people to question what was going on and to say we would like to see opportunities for everyone. And that experience as a child motivated me, inspired me to do what we do today on my campus. UMBC was founded in 1963, the same year that I went to jail. And it was a different kind of place in that it was the first university in my state that could allow people of all races to come there. Before that, every university was either for blacks or whites at that time. Today, we have students from 150 countries. Now, what has made the difference? The big question people always ask is, how is it that you've been able to figure out what we can do? And how do you know you've succeeded? Well, we have become the leading predominantly white university in the country in producing African Americans who get science and engineering PhDs. Give my colleagues a hand for that, would you please? It's a big deal. It's a big deal. And the big question, the real question is, what does it take to help students of any race succeed and from all kinds of economic backgrounds? And there are several major points. Number one, the notion of high expectations. What does it mean to be prepared for college in math and science and engineering? You may not know this, and you heard, I know, a speaker today talk about what's happening in America. I had the privilege of chairing the National Academy's Committee on Underrepresentation in Science. It turns out that only 6% of America's 24-year-olds of all races, only 6% have degrees in STEM. Now, for people of color, particularly blacks and Hispanics, Native Americans, it's only about 2%. And the key here is that what happens is not that people aren't interested in math and science. Large numbers come to college with an interest in engineering or in medicine. The fact is, the majority of students who begin with majors in those disciplines do not make it, do not graduate with bachelors in those areas. For example, I mean, it doesn't surprise people that only 20% of blacks and Hispanics who start with a major in science and engineering will graduate. It shocks people, though, that only 32% of whites who begin with a major in science and engineering will make it, and only 41% of Asian Americans. You put it all together, 2/3 of all college students who start off saying, I want to be an engineer, I want to major in computer science, I want to major in chemistry, 2/3 will leave it. And the number one reason is that they did not do well in the first year courses. And the fact is, when people say, well, it's a K through 12 problem, no, we know we have to continue to improve K through 12, but the fact is, large numbers of students with 5s on AP exams, with perfect math scores, who go to the most prestigious places within the first year change their majors because they did not do well in the coursework. What we work to do in understanding the challenges of minorities has actually helped us with all students, and it is this. When you talk about high expectations, the question is, what's the background the student needs? What kind of math background does the student need? How are you going to go about making sure that you've got faculty ready to work with that student? And most important, how will you measure success as you look at what happens with students? So the high expectations, the notion of building community among the students. If you majored in science and engineering in this country in the last 25 years, you know that much of the work is based on a competitive basis, that often we're talking about curving the grades, and that rarely have people been taught to work in groups. In fact, usually we call it cutthroat. And everybody knows that you have to be very careful because, quite frankly, if somebody else gets a higher grade, it means you may get a lower grade. And so the mindset, the culture in science and teaching and learning has to do with a cutthroat approach too often. And secondly, the assumption is most people won't make it. I can prove it to you very easily. If you look at the number of seats in the second year's work in engineering or in science, you will see it's about 1/3 the number of seats as in the first year's work, because the assumption is most won't make it. And as a result, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so the question is, how do you build a community of students and faculty with this notion that we can do it, that if you don't do well on the test, it doesn't mean it's over, that you want to build competencies, that you want to use the technology to make a difference. And what we ended up doing is building these communities of scholars, but also what we did that was different was to redesign courses. We redesigned all of the STEM courses, and U.S. News calls us the most academically innovative place around. We flipped the work. We've gotten away from the lecture method as the main method. We're using group work. We're using problems out of the companies on campus. We've got about 90 biotech, IT companies, cybersecurity companies on campus. And most important, we have looked at how we use analytics to understand what's working and what's not working, and to continue to revise what we do. And the idea is that if the students fail, we fail. We always say, look at the student to your left, look at the student to your right. When a lot of us were in college, the dean said, one of you will not make it. That's a terrible thing to say to kids. We ought to be saying, look at the student to your left, look at the student to your right. Our goal is to make sure all three of you graduate, and if you don't, we fail, and we don't plan for you to fail. Give us a hand for that philosophy, please. It's a big deal. It's expecting the students to make it. And the third most important point is to get the researchers and the experts connected to the students and get them into the labs and into the companies. And so for us, we've got large numbers of students working on questions of intelligence and cybersecurity, others working in biotech labs, because if they can do well in the coursework and they have a chance to be mentored by people and to get involved in the actual work and see how the engineering, the computer science, the biotech work connects to real life, then they get excited and passionate about the work. And to the extent that the experts say to the people, you can do this, it's amazing how much can be done. What we need in this country will be large numbers of experts who are saying it's not right that there are so few women in science or technology, not right that literally half the population, when you think about minorities and women, are not there, and that we will get them involved in our companies and our labs, build their background K through 12, and then make sure they make it. And then the final piece that's made the difference for us has been evaluation, to see what works and what does not work. You know, it is so amazing to me that often in universities we make decisions based on anecdotal information, as opposed to using analytics, as opposed to seeing what's going well, what's not, as opposed to understanding concepts that are difficult to grasp, thinking of other ways of doing it, and then reshaping the work. If you come to my campus, whether it's in the Chemistry Discovery Center or you're looking at digital humanities, you're going to see that we've gotten away from the lecture method because, quite frankly, large numbers of students in K through 12 and in universities are bored just sitting there all day long. They need ways of having hands-on experiences. They need to feel empowered by the work in the same way that I, as a child, was empowered to get involved in a movement to change this country. What I want you to remember is this: if we want our children to be leaders one day, we have to give them that sense of self. We have to teach them the importance of curiosity. You know, amazingly, Rabi, a Nobel laureate, said that when he was growing up, all of his friends' mothers would ask them at the end of a day, what did you learn in school today? He said, not my Jewish mother. My mother would say, Izzy, did you ask a good question today? And that's what we have to do. We have to encourage kids to ask the good questions and to believe that they can dare to be the best and to change whatever is going on. You know, 50 years ago, as a 12-year-old sitting in that jail, frightened and absolutely not knowing what the future held, I could never have imagined that one day I'd be president of a university with students from 150 countries, that one day I'd have a chance to say to all of my students, you can be excellent in math or you can be excellent in literature, that you can be the best that there is. And that's what makes for passion. What we need in education, what we need in STEM, is the belief in self. it's in the empowering of our children, and it's believing that we should never, never, never give up. I leave you with the words I use with my students all the time. Watch your thoughts, they become your words. Watch your words, they become your actions. Watch your actions, they become your habits. Watch your habits, they become your character. Watch your character, it becomes your destiny, dreams, and values. Thank you all very much. Thank you.